So we're getting towards the end of a day that I have to admit I didn't think was going to be anywhere near as busy as this, but then the bombshell news broke this morning that Jurgen Klopp is going to leave Liverpool Football Club at the end of this season. Now, I imagine the news hasn't sunk in for a lot of fans. You're still reading all the quotes that are out there from the press conference and just digesting all this information that's coming out. But I thought it'd be worth me popping on and giving you really my perspective on the story as a journalist who's close to Liverpool Football Club, and give you an idea of how this day's panned out for me, if it gives you any sort of insight into the story itself and sort of what it's like behind the scenes as a journalist to cover what is an absolutely massive news story around Liverpool Football Club, probably as big as it gets really in terms of a living Liverpool legend actually confirming his departure from the club a few months from it actually happening. So a lot to get into with this one. And I'm going to start, I think, with the idea that, I've been asked a lot since this news broke, and I think this is true of a lot of journalists, is, did you know anything about this? And the truth is, well, any journalist who had a story this big, you would absolutely get that out there. It's not in anyone's best interest, and certainly not your employers, to sit on a story this large. There's no chance anyone knew about that. And I mean, to be honest, that's quite impressive, I have to say, from Liverpool Football Club to keep it quiet. We know now that FSG, the club's owners, have known about Jurgen Klopp's intention to step down since November, so they've done a really good job of keeping that quiet. I mean, they really must have only been discussing that in the small circle, or the inner circle really, at FSG, so the fact that hasn't come out there. And I know that yesterday, on Thursday here, that a few key people on Merseyside were informed of the decision. That was so that Jurgen Klopp could film an interview. Of course, that needed to be edited and put out today and then announced on Liverpool Football Club's official website. I imagine the majority of Liverpool staff around the club will have found the news out at the same time that us journalists did, and the fans did as well. So that shows you how well Liverpool have really done to sort of keep things quiet around this one. But there were actually, interestingly now, with a little bit of hindsight, it's quite interesting to think about this, that there was a couple of hints in the days building up to this that something big was brewing around Liverpool. The first of those was that the Norwich City presser, now the preview in that game in the FA Cup fourth round, that was held on a Thursday. Now, I cannot remember in Jurgen Klopp's entire 8.5 years at Liverpool Football Club him ever having a press conference to preview a weekend game on a Thursday. So it just seemed like one of those little oddities, particularly as it came off the back of Liverpool having played on a Wednesday. It'd be very unusual that he would go with the Thursday presser. But obviously, we suspected that was odd, but nobody really sort of raised any questions. And also, Matt Beard, the Liverpool women's manager, he actually held his press conference. That got moved to the Saturday to preview a game against Arsenal. Now, again, very rare that you would ever get a weekend press conference for those games. So to have it on a Saturday morning is extremely unusual. So again, it was kind of a hint there that something is going on around Liverpool, but I don't think anybody thought it was this. I speak to other reporters around me, and we were all kind of joking, is this going to be the big Kylian Mbappe reveal? And of course, if it was a story that big, there's no doubting that would have got out. Or maybe the possibility of a contract renewal. Trent Alexander-Arnold, for example, Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk, they're all in the last 18 months or so of the contract. So every possibility it could have been that, or anything. I didn't even think it would be that, to be honest, because again, that news tends to leak out. So there's a possibility it may be even something as banal as sort of a commercial activation. That Liverpool have so many commercial deals, and sometimes they need to use the press room for to film in there or to get the players to do something. So there was even the possibility of that. So the fact that there was those couple of hints with those press conferences moving, even then, that hint wasn't enough to get anyone onto the story, and Liverpool had complete control over the messaging. And you've got to say fair play to them, because there's not a lot of clubs of Liverpool's size who would be able to keep their hat on a secret like that. And you look at a few of the clubs across the Premier League don't manage to keep their secrets in-house. So quite impressive, to be honest. So the first we hear about it as journalists today was at the very moment that the website announcement goes up, an email dropped into my inbox saying that there would be a press conference at 3 p.m. at the AXA training ground, and would I like to attend? So I get that double shock of that email landing, and then look on the website and it's all there. And from there it's all about trying to sort of react to it, really. And a couple of things I want to mention actually about the press conference itself. Now, of course, no one's going to be sitting there and asking for team news. It was a totally different press conference to that. So there was a heck of a lot of interest. And actually, when I drove up to the training ground today, there was a queue outside the training ground because the cars were trying to turn in, and they were getting the passes checked and things like that. So the queue actually was blocking the street in Kirkby that leads up to the training ground. So that just showed you how many people are trying to get in as well. And then when they turn up in the room, then it's absolutely packed out with cameras. You know, Jurgen Klopp is usually a draw anyway because he's such a big personality, but I don't think I've ever seen that press room as busy as it was today. The world's media absolutely there to see what Jurgen Klopp has to say for himself, because you know this is a huge story, isn't it? It's a global story. He's a football icon, so no real surprise to see so many press turn up. And I think in terms of the press conference itself, kind of interesting. Jurgen Klopp, for me, didn't have an awful lot of interesting things to say, and I think that is because so much was covered in terms of his reasons for going and what might be next for him. In his interview that he did with LSC TV, that was part of the announcement around his decision to leave, I think a lot of that had been covered in that LFC TV interview. So, you know, he went over a couple of those elements himself again, but, you know, a lot of it we'd already read and heard, really. And he also wasn't interested in getting into any conversations about what his legacy might look like. And the reason for that was that, you know, he said, look, I can do all this looking back on my reign. When it comes to an end, when we get to May and the season's done, that'll be the time for looking backwards. But for now, his entire focus is on ensuring he adds more to that legacy. There's still a possibility of adding more trophies, of course, and he says, you know, he hopes that the best moments are still to come in these next few months, so he didn't want to reflect on that. And so, you know, for that moment, the reason, you know, why he's sort of in the press conference didn't maybe have as much interesting things to say was, for those two reasons, really. Didn't want to get into his legacy, didn't really sort of want to go over again the things he talked about in the LFC TV interview. But for that reason, I thought actually Billy Hogan sat next to him. You know, what he had to say was quite interesting to me, and I thought maybe the main point of the press conference actually was to get the insight from what Liverpool were thinking as an institution, because they are now preparing for life post Jurgen Klopp, and that's kind of difficult to imagine and obviously a huge challenge. So it's great to hear from Billy Hogan and see what he had to say. And I think as a starting point, really reassuring to hear him say that Liverpool are doing the due diligence on in terms of looking for the next possible manager. Now, obviously, that is something he would obviously say. You know, you would expect that FSG are already starting that search, but always good to hear that they'll be, you know, doing that in the right way, going about it in the right way, and looking into it in terms of also the underlying numbers and, you know, taking a statistical approach to it as well. He sort of almost hinted at that as well in his answers, and I think, you know, that's the approach that got Liverpool to Jurgen Klopp, and I think you need to try and repeat that again. Even if you can't get as good a manager as Jurgen Klopp, you need to get as good a manager as you can possibly get in this moment, and you hope that FSG are starting that process in the right way. And by the sounds of what Billy Hogan was saying, they're certainly doing that. And I actually thought another interesting answer from Billy Hogan was from a question I actually asked about Pep Linders and VTO Matos. Now, I was kind of surprised that the statement essentially, you know, declared that both of those people will be leaving the club at the end of the season. I think it's no surprise that Peter Kravitz will go. His fate is, of course, so tied to Jurgen Klopp that is no real shock that he's going to be going with him. But Pep Linders was obviously at Liverpool when Klopp turned up, and also it's been so much talk around him being a potential successor to Klopp. So the fact that Liverpool seemingly ruled that out straight away in the statement, that caught my eye, really. And it sort of, and I also, you know, with VTO Matos, he is the link between the academy and the first team. He's not necessarily a Jurgen Klopp coaching staff member, so again, kind of surprised to hear that he was going. So I asked Billy Hogan basically, you know, were there any attempts to keep either of them, you know, any chance to keep their experience around the place? And he was kind of, you know, evaded that answer in the sense, but he didn't make any play at the idea that either of them would be asked to stay, or there was any possibility of Matos staying in his role, or Pep Linders perhaps even stepping up to be Jurgen Klopp's successor. He just seemed to really shoot that down, which I think comes as a little bit of a surprise, but he did emphasise that, look, they're going to go and try management and their own coaching careers elsewhere, and we will do everything to support them. But just maybe a little bit of a surprise that won't be at Anfield and they won't be part of the process. Pep Linders clearly, it doesn't seem, will we even get an interview for the Liverpool job. So I thought that was kind of an interesting takeaway from the press conference. And for me, sort of the thing that sort of most made my ears prick up in the whole thing really was this idea that Pep Linders is not going to be in the running when so many people have touted over the years that he might be. So obviously that leaves the question then of who is going to be next. I touched on it there, that I think, you know, analytics are going to be a key part of this search. I think Liverpool are always looking into the numbers behind managers. You think about when Klopp arrived from Dortmund and he spoke to staff at Liverpool. He spoke to Ian Graham, who is big in the numbers element of the club, and Ian Graham said to him, look, I looked at your final season at Dortmund, and even though on paper it was disastrous, we knew that the underlying numbers suggested that you were a far better coach than that was showing. You were doing a better job with your team than the results actually turned out. So, of course, it's easy to tell those stories when you're appointing a manager who's actually won trophies anyway. He's won 2 league titles with the Dortmund side who weren't fancied against Bayern Munich. He's got to a Champions League final, again, with not a typical European powerhouse. It's quite easy still to make that appointment, even if the numbers do back it up. I think what Liverpool need to do now is, because there's no obvious Jurgen Klopp out there isn't someone who's done a similar thing, no one who's dethroned PSG maybe in France or doing the same to Bayern Munich, although you could argue that Xabi Alonso might be that man at the moment, but he hasn't still got over the line. I think what they will look at more than trophies than anything in this search is a look at those underlying numbers. Which managers most fit our style of play, and which managers do these things that we know, if you do those successfully at a club that has got our resources, tend to bring you a lot of wins and therefore increase your chances of winning trophies. That's really how I expect the search to go, and I think there's a couple of names we can already maybe put on the short list for that. As I say, Xabi Alonso, no doubt he'll be on the list. Whether he gets over the line with Leverkusen in that title race this season or not, I still think, yes, there's that emotional link there in terms of he is a Liverpool legend, but I think they'll be looking at him just on the basis that he's a young coach who's doing well in a top 5 European league. So they'd be absolutely remiss not to have a look at him. The one question around him is his style of football so different to Jurgen Klopp that he maybe doesn't fit this squad? That is a question that FSG will have to answer and look at. But he's obviously making a really impressive start to his coaching career, and I think the idea of coming back to Anfield, what a romantic idea that would be. So I'm sure he will be at the very least in the running for this job. And another name I think worth mentioning is Ruben Amorim at Sporting. By all accounts, plays a sort of similar aggressive style of football that Liverpool will be looking into. And also, he's a young manager who actually does have trophies on his CV and is consistently gets his team to perform maybe above the budget as well. So he's shown that consistently. I think it's logical then that you would hope he would be able to come to Liverpool and sort of repeat that trick. And obviously you're operating in a higher stratosphere when you come to Liverpool with the resources they've got. So if you can translate that in the way that Jurgen Klopp did coming from Borussia Dortmund, then Liverpool will be on to a winner. But those are just 2 names I sort of wanted to maybe hone in on as potential candidates. But there's such a long way to go. I'm sure we will learn more as the weeks go on. Obviously the focus at the moment is all Jurgen Klopp, but I'm sure that names will start to come out. And I also think it's key for Liverpool as well. Let's not forget that they're losing a sporting director at the end of January. That news was confirmed today. Jörg Schmadtke will be leaving at the end of this January transfer window. So a sporting director is something that Liverpool absolutely have to look at getting in. I think the structure post Klopp is not going to be similar to what they have at the moment in terms of, Jörg Schmadtke isn't really above Jurgen Klopp in the pecking order. They work together almost as equals, probably Jörg Schmadtke, to be honest, underneath Jurgen Klopp, doing the negotiating rather than much of the identifying of players. I think that dynamic is going to change. I think FSG will be more comfortable with a model whereby there's a sporting director at the head of the sporting project and then a manager working underneath that, and those two hopefully dovetailing really nicely in terms of the style of play that they want to buy players for and then gets implemented on the pitch. So it's a big appointment, the sporting director one, and one again as much as the manager that Liverpool have to get right. So it's all massive change really that's coming up, isn't it? To get that sporting director appointment right, then to get the manager as well, and then you just hope that he can bring the right coaching staff in, because he'll have to bring his own coaching staff with none of Klopp's coaching staff sticking around. It's, as I say, an awful lot of change, an awful lot of risk being taken. But you have to back FSG. They've made sensible infrastructure or appointments in the past and decisions around that in the past. So you just got to hope that they get this one right. As I say, as a journalist, it's a sad time to see someone like Jurgen Klopp go. I don't want to get too much into his legacy because I think that the time will come to do that towards the end of the season. But just a brief moment to say that it's going to be sad to lose him as much for his personality as anything else, because he's not just a world-class manager, but I think he's been an excellent person to deal with, and also someone who'll always give you a great quote. He's always a laugh. He can be stern at times, but not, quite rarely really, and it's been great to deal with. So, sad time for us as journalists to lose him, as much as it is for supporters. And obviously there's every chance that you're not going to see as good a football manager come in, just because of how good Jurgen Klopp is. Arguably for me the best manager in the world at the moment, or he's at least the equal of Pep Guardiola, I would say. Now, I'm going to wrap it up there. Please let me know in the comments your reaction to this news. And wow, I imagine Liverpool fans, as I say, are still absolutely stunned by it. But I want to hear what you think. Maybe let me know who you think should be the next manager of Liverpool Football Club. That decision's still got to come. That's a big one that's coming up for Liverpool. In fact, let me know your sporting director candidates as well. That'd be interesting to know who you think should be heading up Liverpool's sporting project in a post-Klopp world. But of course, we shouldn't maybe focus on this too much going forward. I think in the weeks ahead there are so many games to come. There are trophies to fight for. Liverpool in an unbelievable position to make this a truly magical finish to Jurgen Klopp's reign. So maybe we should think and focus, and as fans certainly should focus a little bit more on that and the good times that are to come, and to squeeze every little last bit of joy out of Jurgen Klopp being the manager of Liverpool Football Club, because up to this point it's been incredible, hasn't it? And I'm sure there are still more stories to write in these months ahead. So I'm going to wrap it up there. If you could please like the video and subscribe as usual. As I say, so much more to come. So I'll see you guys very, very soon.